Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Time About the Movies. It's the weekend of August 16th, 1989, and you're probably wondering what's going on with this camera angle and the light. Well, if you didn't hear yesterday, I was just not in a real good mood. My old TV went out, so we got a new one today. We plugged it in. Unfortunately, the plug where I usually use my light equipment, the plug is way deep back beneath the dresser and the computer table here, so fortunately, I'm not able to use that. I'm actually using the lamp up here that I have. So, still kind of tinkering a little bit here, but it's definitely looking better than yesterday, I would say. But let's go ahead and get on to the first movie because we've got 7 movies to look at today, and we're going to start off with John Candy and yet another one of his comedy classics, and that is Uncle Buck. So Uncle Buck is, of course, the third film that John Hughes and John Candy have done together. Of course, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, The Great Outdoors, and now this. And while this isn't certainly as good as Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which I think is a comedy masterpiece, it's a little bit better than The Great Outdoors. And I like The Great Outdoors, but Uncle Buck is just a great movie. I really enjoy this movie a lot. John Candy works very well here. You also have Amy Madigan in this. You also have Jean Louisa Kelly, who would later go on to star in the show Yes Dear. Gabby Hoffman, who we would later see in shows such as Girls and Transparent, and a young little boy named Macaulay Culkin, who went on to work with John Hughes again on a bigger, more grander size hit. But we'll get to that when we get to 1990, and I think you all know what I'm talking about. But everybody here works really well here. I like the comedy. I like the dynamics they have here, and it's just a funny movie. It's another funny movie from John Candy when he was at his true peak. I mean, this is really good stuff here. It's a great comedy, great family film, great cast all around. John Candy is great. The situations are great. It's just a great movie, like I said. So many memorable lines, so many memorable moments. Not much more to say about that one. Uncle Buck, it's a comedy classic. Need I say more? So let's go ahead and move on to the next movie. Casualties of War, which is a Vietnam film that takes place in the 60s, stars Michael J. Fox and Sean Penn, directed by Brian De Palma, who had just come off of The Untouchables. And it's a very underrated movie. I know Platoon was was the biggest Vietnam film that came out at the time. Took a lot of the attention away from other movies that were trying to be like this. But Casualties of War is a very underrated movie, and it's largely because of the great performances by Michael J. Fox and Sean Penn. They're very good in this movie. The dramatic elements in here are very good. The acting is very well done. The writing here is pretty good too, and it's a very underrated movie. I don't think a lot of people really talk about this movie all that much. Was it a big hit? No, it wasn't a big hit. I'm looking right here at the Wikipedia page. It didn't do so well at the box office, but it did do well with critics. And it's really one of those things. It's really one of those movies that really is a movie that I think gets better and better with time. It's a movie that I think gets a whole lot better with time. And I think a lot of people have really come around to it. Phenomenal movie, great underrated film. If you haven't seen Casualties of War yet, I highly recommend checking it out. It's a really good movie that a lot of people really unfortunately have not seen. And speaking of movies that people have not seen before, you probably didn't know there was another Disney live action film that came out in 1989, and that was Cheetah. So Cheetah is a live action adventure film, very reminiscent of what Disney used to do with the nature films, but this is more of a written narrative. And yeah, not a whole lot of people really talk about this movie, and it's not that it's a bad movie, it's just kind of forgettable. I mean, there's only one real thing that makes this movie stand out compared to other movies, and that's the fact that this was actually the first movie from Disney to use the phrase Hakuna Matata. Of course, Hakuna Matata is associated with the Lion King, but they use this line in this movie. If that's really the best you can say about this movie, then there's not really a whole lot you can say there. It's not, like I said, it's not a bad movie. It's just mostly forgettable. Some of the animal sequences I think are well done, but I think this just needed a bigger narrative to really get this going. So, Cheetah, okay movie, not really memorable, but it's there. It came out this weekend, so let's go ahead and move on to another movie, which a lot of people really forget about, but it's notable for one reason. It's called Let It Ride, starring Richard Dreyfuss. Now, the one thing that's noticeable about Let It Ride is that the director of this movie, Joe Pytka, also went on to direct Space Jam. This is one of his only 2 movies that he directed as in terms of feature films. He is actually he actually directed a documentary that came out 2 years prior to this, but this was one of the 2 movies that came out. This is one of the 2 movies that came out that he directed, and it's mostly forgettable too. Like, it's one of those movies that not a whole lot of people talk about, even though it's got a great cast: Richard Dreyfuss, David Johansen, Terry Garr. It has a concept that could be funny, but it's mostly just forgettable, and I think a lot of people really did forget about it. I just don't think the script really did a good job of really emphasizing what could the great comedy that you could have had with this. I think there could have been a lot better comedic elements that you could have thrown into this. And I think Richard Dreyfuss can be very funny. He can be a very funny comic actor. And he's also a very good dramatic actor too. But most of the stuff that's in here is kind of formulaic. You can kind of predict what's going to happen. And this movie just made horse racing kind of boring. I mean, horse racing pretty much is kind of boring. I'm sorry, I'm not a big fan of the Kentucky Derby. I mean, once you see horses go around the racetrack, it's not really all that exciting as much as people want you to think it is. At least in my opinion. I know there's a lot of people who like horse riding and horse racing, but that's just my opinion. I mean, maybe that's why I didn't like this movie so much. It's one that instantly is forgettable right away, so that's my thoughts on Let It Ride. Mostly forgettable. Let's go ahead and move on to the next film, Cheech Marin in Rude Awakening. Great cast in this movie: Cheech Marin, Eric Roberts, Julie Haggerty, Robert Carradine, Cindy Williams, Tom Sizemore, Andrea Martin, Raydon Chung, Louise Lasser. Great cast in a movie that a lot of people didn't like. I mean, for the little bit I've seen from this movie, I can kind of see why. They have a good idea here, but unfortunately, like so many other movies that try to be like this, it just doesn't really work all that well. I don't think the comedy is as well written as I think they're trying to make it. So, yeah, it's another one of those movies that has a good concept, but unfortunately, there's just nothing there to make it funny. The script is not really that good. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, even though one of the writers on this is Richard LaGravenese, who went on to become a writer for several Oscar-nominated and winning movies. But other than that, though, yeah, it's a forgettable movie. Like, I didn't even know what it was until I actually saw the little bit of footage that I saw. But that's Rude Awakening. And now let's head on to the last movie, and that is Eddie and the Cruisers 2. Who was asking for a sequel to Eddie and the Cruisers 2? I mean, the first Eddie and the Cruisers was not a big hit, and it only found a little bit of an audience after HBO started playing it on TV. But other than that, though, I hardly ever hear any people really talk about the first Eddie and the Cruisers, or this film in particular. And after seeing the little bit I've seen, I can kind of see why. It looks basically like a generic rock movie that is trying to have this message about selling out and just playing for the love of the music, man. But I mean, I just don't think it's really all that exciting, really. I mean, like I said, maybe there are people that like this movie, but when I watched it, I was just kind of like, okay, what's the purpose here? And it's just like, I don't know. I just couldn't get into it, honestly. I know they obviously had some people who wanted to see the continuation of this because it did well enough on cable to get a sequel, and like I said, I can't really figure out why. There's nothing really about this movie that works for me, especially since I've seen this story done a whole lot better. But yeah, that's all I gotta say on Eddie and the Cruisers 2. It's there, it exists. Somebody out there likes it. So they made a sequel for it, and that's the end result. And with that said, it's going to wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. Next time around, we wrap up the month of August. We've got 7 more movies to look at. The Package, Millennium, is Wire, the John Belushi biopic, which I can already tell you is not very good. The Adventures of Milo and Otis, Heart of Dixie, Cookie, Little Monsters, and Romero. And then that'll probably be the last one for this week because, of course, I have Steel City Con coming up. We got to get ready for that on Thursday, and I won't be done until Sunday night. So you probably won't see another episode after tomorrow until after that. So Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and as always, if you want to see more videos like this, check out the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode. Hopefully this angle works a little bit better, and the lighting here works a lot better than yesterday. I gotta work with what I can work here, so thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys tomorrow for the next video, and until then, take care.